Good afternoon, everybody. I'm thrilled that so many of you have joined us today for this, the first of our Masterpiece Online Talks and Lectures program. Designed to reflect the ethos of our physical fair and to best support our galleries, Masterpiece Online will, I hope, encourage viewers not just to view and buy works of art, but to join the conversation by engaging with our 138 exhibitors. For those of you who may not have had the opportunity to visit Masterpiece in past years, its unique characteristic is to find what we perhaps refer to as cross-collecting. You will find works of art ranging in date from classical antiquity to modern design. And to create the most beguiling atmosphere, we carefully ensure that all different fields of works of art, be that jewelry, old master pictures, contemporary design, or 18th century furniture, are carefully mixed to allow one to serendipitously encounter works with which one may not be so familiar. It truly provides a real Aladdin's cave of discovery and an extraordinary opportunity to learn. The success of Masterpiece is completely underpinned by the connoisseurship and scholarship of our exhibitors. And in the absence of our physical fair this year, we are relishing the opportunity to showcase this knowledge to our existing and new audiences through our online talks programs, the videos by our exhibitors hosted on our newly designed website, as well as through short Instagram movies. Discovering about works of art through the voice of a passionate exhibitor is one of the most engaging ways to foster appreciation and knowledge. And you will find on our masterpiecefair.com website detailed information on all our programs. During the course of Masterpiece Online, I'm asking viewers to our panel discussions, our virtual tours and private views to consider a donation to our newly established Masterpiece Cultural Fund, through which we are committed long-term to supporting cultural institutions and initiatives spanning research, conservation, and education. As a first small focused step, the proceeds received until the end of July this year, together with a contribution from Masterpiece, will be distributed to those museums participating in our talks and lectures program. And you will find, should you so wish, a link to the Masterpiece Cultural Fund in the chat box at the end of this talk. I'm particularly delighted to welcome our speakers to today's panel discussion, the Multidisciplinary Fair, where art, design, and curation converge. Michael Diaz-Griffith, who will, I know, expertly mediate today's discussion, is Executive Director of Sir John Soane's Museum Foundation, the New York-based foundation that supports the Soane Museum in London. In 2019, he co-founded the New Antiquarians, a community of interest for young people who love old things, and he was recently named to House Beautiful's list of 2020 visionaries for his advocacy of antiques, historic art, and preservation. In his 4 years as a director of the Winter Show, America's longest running art and antiques fair, he helped orchestrate the show's repositioning as an internationally important event. He now sits on the fair's steering committee and serves as co-chair of its Young Collectors Night. Michael writes about art and architectural history under his Instagram handle at Michael Diaz-Griffith. Isabella Lauder-Frost, an art historian by training and with more than 15 years of art market and collection management experience to draw upon, advises her clients across Impressionist, modern, and contemporary art. Her specialities include art in France from 1850 to 1970, with a particular focus on the work of Pablo Picasso. In 2017, she joined Murphy & Partners in London. Prior to this, she worked for Heli Namad London for over 9 years, advising on sales and acquisitions, institutional exhibitions of the collection, and brought large consignment groups to auction. She has a superlative wide network of global museum contacts and strong relationships with a large range of leading experts in most fields of art and design. Jamie Drake is co-founder of the award-winning multidisciplinary interior design firm Drake Anderson. Arguably the foremost colorist of our day, Jamie brings his singular, exuberant design sensibility to every project. A graduate of Parsons, he is lauded for his ability to distill his vast knowledge of periods and styles with a discriminatingly modern connoisseurship, creating glamorous and eloquent environments, always interpreted through the unique prism of each client. His work has featured in virtually every design publication of note, including Architectural Digest, Elle Decor, House Beautiful, and Interior Design. Amongst the accolades too numerous to mention, he has held a spot for several years on the prestigious Architectural Design AD 100 list and the Elle Decor A list. He has also been bestowed with Fashion Group International's Knight of Star Awards for Interior Design, inducted into the ASID College of Fellows, and named to Interior Design Magazine's Hall of Fame. Extremely active in many causes, he currently serves on the boards of the Alpha Workshops, the New York Community Trust, Kips Bay Boys and Girls Club, and Parsons School of Design. He is co-chair of the Kips Bay Decorative Show House and their President's Dinner, benefiting the Kips Bay Boys and Girls Club, and is a recipient of a partnership for the Homeless Directors Award. Stephen Harrison is the Curator of Decorative Art and Design at the Cleveland Museum of Art, where he is responsible for European and American collections of decorative art from 1500 to the present day. He joined the museum in 2005 and curated numerous projects, including the recent exhibition, The Jazz Age, American Style in the 1920s, co-organized with the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum in New York. Before coming to Cleveland, Stephen had held curatorial positions in New Orleans, Dallas, and Atlanta. He is the author of numerous scholarly publications, including the award-winning catalogue for the 2008 exhibition, Artistic Luxury, Fabergé Tiffany Lalique, and he lectures widely on the subject of decorative art and historic interior design around the world. He is a graduate of the University of Virginia, where he was a Jefferson Scholar, and holds graduate degrees in historic preservation from the University of Pennsylvania and in early American material culture from the Winterthur Museum program at the University of Delaware. And with that, thank you, and I'm going to hand over to Michael.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction, Philip, and thank you for having us today for this panel discussion. I'm delighted to be here with this esteemed group and to be discussing a topic that is not well trod. If you've joined this panel discussion, you may have read the description that was posted online, and that was a stab on our part to get at a phenomenon that we've seen develop in the past couple of decades, and that is the multidisciplinary fair that combines aspects of the traditional art fair with some features that have traditionally not been a part of those fairs. The world of design has become more involved in the life of art fairs than in previous periods. And critically, museums have aligned with art fairs, bringing all sorts of new dynamics to what was previously a principally commercial venue and experience. So we'll be staking out a definition of the multidisciplinary fair today, characterized, of course, by masterpiece, but we'll also be thinking about this topic in broader terms, in the context of the wider art market. And as we do that, we'll be looking backwards at live events from the past, and also forward to events that we hope to attend in the future under the same roof and with glasses of champagne in our hands when we're able to join together again. So, you know, we are really happy to have you with us on this exploration. It will be an informal chat. We're going to try to sort of generate new ideas and thought as we go along. It's not a formal presentation, so we encourage your participation. As was mentioned, in the waiting room, we welcome questions in the Q&A box, and I encourage you to type them out whenever they occur to you. We won't address them during the main part of the conversation, but we will come to them at the end, addressing all of them, hopefully, unless you send thousands, and then we'll have to pick a few and discuss those. But we welcome those comments and thoughts. I think that as we speak, we're going to sort of define and redefine the multidisciplinary fair Each of you is an expert in a distinct discipline. So to begin, I want to sort of explore that and your specific experience of the Multidisciplinary Fair and Masterpiece. So beginning with you, Stephen, and the sort of curatorial perspective that we'll be thinking about today, I'd like to just ask how your experience of fairs has changed over the past, say, 2 decades. You know, we all know that museum curators shop at fairs like Masterpiece with their trustees, but they also do a lot of other things at art fairs. One of those things is vetting objects for authenticity, date, and condition. And that is a practice that is not widely visible to the public, but it's very important. I know that you're involved with vetting at Masterpiece. So I'd love to hear about that and also about some of the other ways that you and your colleagues in the museum world interact with fairs like Masterpiece.
Thank you, Michael. Well, through my career as a curator, I have always attended art fairs because they are really where you can see the most work at the you know, in the shortest period of time, and they provide a wonderful gauge of the market and what is available, and then the quality. And I think that vetting has really helped ensure that the quality at art fairs has become much higher. And when I first began as a young assistant curator, you know, we really had to be on our toes for the museum acquisitions because, you know, some things might not be what they seem to be. And now we bring science to bear. We have conservators who join us with the vetting when it's a live presentation. And online, we talk amongst ourselves as colleagues. It's not just me. There are quite a few colleagues who are involved in the vetting of Masterpiece. And through consensus, we are able, I think, to ask for documentation when it needs to be there. We can agree on authentications. And I think now the buyer, and museums included, can be very confident in what they are buying at a Masterpiece art fair.
Agreed. And you know, it's just occurring to me that the rise of vetting at fairs like Masterpiece and the Winter Show has in some sense allowed museums to engage with those fairs in a more public way through loan exhibitions, because the integrity of the fair is so well established through the vetting process. You know, it's sort of safe for the museum to align with the fair. And at the Winter Show, for example, each year there is a fabulous loan exhibition from usually an American museum. Masterpiece also has a similar program. So do you see the connection becoming closer and closer between fairs and museums?
I do, I really do. And I think that's good for business, for the dealers, because I think they are able to align themselves with museum quality material. And I think it's good for the institutions because it does present an opportunity to reach an audience that may not necessarily come into a museum or know the collections of that particular institution.
Absolutely. And in the case of fairs like Masterpiece and the Winter Show, sometimes the museums are from a region that may not be particularly well trafficked by certain audiences, and it brings those institutions right to those audiences, which is a fabulous thing for everyone. How do you navigate the many roles that a curator seems to have at an art fair in 2020? I mean, you're vetting, you're also perhaps shopping, you're learning about material that may be new to you, or maybe you're handling a particular object for the first time. And you're also educating your trustees or maybe others through a loan exhibition experience. So how do you kind of manage all of that?
Well, one of the many ways that we collect in the museum world today is by engaging our patrons and constituents to really have a vested interest in the works of art that we acquire. So one of the ways we do that is by taking groups to fairs like Masterpiece, so that they can see what we are looking for in an object when we want to acquire it for the museum. And so often these trips result in actual acquisitions that come from patrons becoming so excited about something that they want to buy it for the museum, not just for themselves. And so there's this wonderful opportunity to engage our patrons in a much more meaningful way through the art fair process. Now, I will say that, you know, as you mentioned, you know, the various roles of a curator, you know, when I'm in London for those few days, it's blissful, but it's also unbelievable work because you're taking people all around town, you're looking at things in auction and in dealers' shops in London, as well as the fair. And of course, you know, not to mention the great burden of having to have dinner and drinks in these wonderful restaurants in London. So yes, it's the work of a curator, you know, is very difficult.
No, but I love that you mentioned those rich meals, because I think we're all expected to work hard during this period, but we're also expected to dine hard, and it can be a lot. You know,
Well, you can see I haven't missed one yet, so there we are.
Not until this week. This is your opportunity to sort
Right.
of drink Diet Coke as you peruse Masterpiece online.
Exactly.
But you're pointing to something else. You know, there's so much discussion right now in the art world about what art fairs are good for. And, you know, one of those discussions pertains to the idea that galleries are increasingly letting go of their brick and mortar spaces. And so they need a physical location to convene their material and buyers. So that's one thing that something like Masterpiece or London Art Week does. You know, it sort of creates a physical existence, a pop-up, if you will, for galleries. But it's also the sort of rise of these large fairs positioned alongside auctions or other art world events. It creates these sort of tidy weeks that are very intensive, but it allows, for example, your group to fly over to London and to do a great deal in a very concentrated period of time. And that feels important.
Absolutely.
So let's to Isabella, because, you know, Stephen has a very unique set of experiences that we'll continue to explore. And so do you. As an art advisor, first of all, I'm just interested in knowing how you shop a fair like Masterpiece. You know, it's a vast fair, it's a cross-collecting fair, and that makes it very different from perhaps a specialty fair that only has prints or only has works from a single period. So what is it like for you and your clients?
For me, I think actually the scale of Masterpiece is incredibly attractive because I am much used to larger, more overwhelming fairs. And especially in the era where fair fatigue was a very common side effect, which now you find yourself missing a fair very much, as opposed to being inundated with fairs you didn't even know existed, constantly flooding into your inbox. The thing that I like most about Masterpiece is actually how achievable it is to cover so much ground, so much history, so much art, but in a really tightly curated way that's really enjoyable for a client. They don't find it exhausting like they do with other much larger fairs. And that's the thing, you know, a lot of my clients really want to focus on maybe only going to 1 or 2 fairs a year just because of time management. So, but the great beauty of Masterpiece with having it in London and having it built in right after the auctions usually is that it's really easy to encourage clients to visit because of the location. Obviously, the restaurants are amazing. You can make a day of it. And they don't feel visually exhausted after a couple of hours just by too many things jostling for their attention. They're able to really digest each booth and to be able to see much more of an environment to view art in and to view design in, because you have slightly wider booths. You're able to create some context to what you brought to the fair. And I think that's really nice as well for clients who are imagining how something's going to look in their home, as opposed to buying something just because they like it and because, you know, you've really got to hurry up because it's the first day of the fair and otherwise it's gone forever.
That is such a good point. And I want to place a bookmark here because in a moment, I want to discuss with Jamie how design at the fair impacts the way that collectors view works. But before that, I just want to ask you, Isabella, you know, has the cross-collecting fair in general at all changed the way your clients look at their own collecting practices? I mean, I think it's very meaningful that you can
for sure. And because I cross Impressionist and Modern and post-war and contemporary, which is quite rare, I'm all about cross-category as much as possible. So, and I think that's really where you can open up the most interesting conversations in clients' collections, or they're just exposed to things that they wouldn't be if they were only at a contemporary art fair. So they engage with so much more volume. There's so many more opportunities to actually to speak to gallerists as well, because the pace of the fair is a little bit more calm and with wider boulevards, and you know, it's the ethos, you know, you can stop, and gallerists don't mind being bothered to explain an object without feeling the need, you know, necessarily that they're going to be disappointed if you don't walk away with it. You're able to very much open up a client's eyes to things they may have never considered before, seen before, just because, you know, it's caught out of the corner of their eyes. Yes. And I'm all, you know, I think there's fantastic conversations to be had between, you know, contemporary collectors getting more into old masters, which I'm very pro, getting more into even, you know, more specialist fields like looking at antiquity or, you know, pre-Columbian works. And I think especially for clients, it really opens up the possibility of what they can do that they may not have realized just from the very small niche that they may have been collecting from.
And if I may jump in, I have, in fact, a great patron of the museum who really considers himself a contemporary art collector, but he's been buying as vigorously in the works from the 1920s and teens, early modernism, as he has been in contemporary art. And interestingly, it's he came to that conclusion through design and through his architect suggesting to him that this kind of material would work well with his contemporary art collection. And then he came to us to help advise him. So I'm sure, Jamie, you would agree with that, you know, that's often where these cross-generational cross-currents can come together.
Oh, and Jamie, make sure your sound is on. We want to hear. Oh, excellent. Yes, Jamie, talk to us about design at the fair and how it changes a fairgoer's experience. And Christian, on the production side, if you could call up Jamie's first image, I think it would be terrific.
So for me, going to Masterpiece, which I've done for, I don't know, 10 years or so, has always been so special and so wonderful because I get to go and appreciate absolutely across the entire fair because we buy things from all the disciplines for our clients in interior design. In 2012, I was asked to design this stand specifically to appeal and to demonstrate to collectors who might not be collectors in the traditional sense. So many, I think, of the people who are buying now are acquisitors and accumulators more than classical collectors. And so our job was to show how things from the 18th, the 19th century, the 20th century could all mix together. And so we have things from a variety of dealers, contemporary photography by David LaChapelle over a 19th century British cabinet, French chairs, contemporary sculpture from Carpenter's Workshop, a light fixture hanging overhead. And that to me is a great thrill, and for me personally very exciting to see how everything comes together. I don't get too involved in buying my clients' jewelry, but as I'm a product designer, I find a lot of inspiration in the jewelry too.
And perhaps you buy some for yourself. I mean, this is the great fun of Masterpiece. There truly is.
I certainly always try something on.
You see, and when you're a museum curator, you can get involved in the jewelry as well. I curate from upstairs to downstairs.
I love it. You have an enviable position because it's a wide remit. So you can get into all sorts of trouble.
I think we all have the enviable position of having gone to the physical fair, and now we're learning how to do things differently across the boards. I think it's not unlike the theater world or concerts. Yes, we're viewing them online, and it's a different experience. That's all it is. It's different. We have to divorce ourselves from the three-dimensional reality and the excitement that comes with being with an object in person. Now we have to study it slightly differently.
I'd actually love to ask Isabella's opinion on this, going maybe slightly off topic, but I think we're all thinking about these things. How have you found that clients are more or less willing to acquire art under these circumstances?
So it's 50-50, and I think everyone, I work with clients who, you know, vary in age from their 20s all the way through to much later generations. And I think because of that, there isn't really a clear answer. It's been very much across the board based on people's families, their commitments, their companies. So some have been the same. Others have actually decided that it's a good time to stop, review, and, you know, obviously if the right piece comes up, then they'll think, but and then there's some who are just not engaged right now at all, which of course is of course totally fair. But, you know, they've seen huge success with online auctions over the last couple of months, across all fields. And which has shown, you know, the strength of the buying power that is still active. And I think quite a lot of that was a surprise to everyone of how willing people are to change and how quickly people can adapt to viewing things online, to looking at things not necessarily in the flesh. The true test will be, I think, with the auctions at the end of this month and the beginning of July, with the big marquee sales. But again, I think, you know, a lot of the material is very strong, and same with the offerings that have been coming up to now. So I think it's very solid. There's obviously going to be an impact, but I think the appetite, you know, you have people who are sitting at home who are thinking about things for their walls. And I mean, I've done that this lockdown. And I think that's very easy. So I think especially for lower value items, there's obviously going to be a much higher traction rate just because people are sitting at home and they're thinking about, you know, blank walls and blank spaces and spending more time in their domestic environments. But I think it's been very active across the board. I think there's obviously a chunk of clients for everyone who are not engaged, but again, you know, that can happen through many other factors. So I think the important thing is that it has been very solid.
Yes, and there have been some remarkable results from both fairs and auctions even in the past week. So there's reason to feel older collectors some credit, because I think there was a lot of discussion in the last couple of years about how younger buyers will migrate to online buying, but older buyers might not. But that's not what I've seen. I've seen that, you know, as with so many other things, the pandemic has sort of accelerated people's uptake of digital content and digital experiences, including buying, and there's sort of no age limit on it. Now,
with
Jamie?
my experience in our business over the last a decade, the digital content has become ever more important to clients who are very busy and hire experts and entrust them to bring things to them. So they're already used to selecting things without visiting them in person. And so I think the entry level is not so high actually to transfer completely virtual and digital.
Absolutely. And vetting has a... Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think for an art fair of the level of Masterpiece, that's why the vetting is so important for this online version. It's important for both, but for online, you know, I think really there should be a certain level of quality that's maintained and a certain level of documentation and authenticity.
Could you just briefly tell us, Stephen, about how vetting for the online fair has been different from the physical fair without giving away too many secrets?
Well, in some respects, it's not as easy because we're vetting from photographs and images. But in others, it's been a little bit better because as a result of having to just do it by imagery, the dealers have had to really, open the files and pull out the documentation and attach it to it so that we are able to see that that piece has a signature, and we're able to see that something has been reupholstered, or because it's all been documented, and we can then evaluate whether it's the quality of the fair or not. And I have to say, Masterpiece for so long has been a fair that has demanded that kind of level, that by now only a few dealers, and they're mostly just simple mistakes that have they have the documentation, they just didn't put it on, So just asking the question is what we really do more than anything at this point.
Yeah. It's a very different time from, I'm thinking of the Grosvenor House Fair, with everyone sort of underneath the table and possibly
Right.
no documentation. I mean, that fair did so much to help establish vetting as a practice, but it's evolved through Masterpiece and other fairs since then. Now,
Yes,
Jamie,
the wily ways of the 1920s they lasted a long time and spilled into the great fairs of the 70s and 80s, and so now we're hopefully past that, and we're all looking at the same things in the same way.
yes, and with greater transparency than ever, which I think
Exactly.
makes the antiques market in particular, and the old masters, really any pre-contemporary work is I think much more accessible now, because people can be much more confident generally that there is a paper trail, etc. Now, Jamie, before we move into that topic, I'd like to dig down into the live experience of the fair, because designers really have become sort of impresarios of set design at these events. And we'll look at your second image and then move on to your third and fourth images. But, I'm interested in how we move from the vignette you create at the fair to shopping with a client at the same event and introducing material from the fair into their own domestic environment. Can you just tell us a bit about that journey and how you experience it with your clients?
Yes, absolutely. And Stephen, you gave me a laugh and made me think back to all the years I visited Grosvenor House, and how we now have the beauty of having a fair with wide aisles, boulevards, and light and air, and much better designed stands. And I do think that the whole experience then becomes so much more pleasurable for a client that they're excited to come. Now, they often come with a very short time period. They're looking at their watch. Okay, what are we here to look at? What are we here to look at? And they have 45 minutes or an hour. They might not be like one of us who will spend 5, 6, 7 hours and then come back the next day and spend that time again. But it's also a wonderful opportunity for a client often to see something in comparison to something very similar. I remember a few years ago, there happened to be 3 Japan drop front secretaires at the fair. And there was one specifically that I felt was right for my client, but we were able to walk between the stands and look at the 3 in comparison. And that is invaluable. Also the excitement of being with the piece, walking through the fair, and seeing them set in these beautiful backgrounds and booths. And I think that the level of design has become so important that stands that aren't so strong, they don't sing. There's no opera to them. For a designer also, there's lots of different opportunities to interact and to introduce yourself to a client. Certainly having this enormous, fabulous stand that we did, and we designed the architectural background and chose us all the beautiful textiles and wall coverings, gives an opportunity to 3-dimensionally show what we can do. but there's other opportunities at fairs as well, being on panels and talking about our work in a different way. And you know, the multidisciplinary fair truly is a highlight of my year.
We love that. And let's talk about how you translate what you do at the fair back into the client's world. So if Christian could call up image 3, we could maybe look at something a client has acquired from the fair.
So here is a contemporary apartment in New York that we created for a client from the Middle East. And this enormous Frederickson Stallard light, which is such a beacon of hope in a contemporary way, but also of exploration and sort of looking at something, came from the fair. It came from David Gill Gallery, and we saw it there. And the excitement to see that is palpable. And then you're also left with a memory of where you bought something, where it came from. And I think clients love memory, and they love to hold on to memories and excitement. The next image also, image 4, this beautiful Tony Cragg also came from the fair. I found it at the fair and showed the client a few different options. I think that all came from the fair. And this was the one that really was the right piece, and they immediately responded to it.
That's gorgeous, gorgeous, Jamie.
Thank you.
So I'm thinking, it's funny, I'm thinking that these fairs are becoming more and more comfortable for visitors. And I know that at the Winter Show, that's also true. And I would say, and I think my Winter Show colleagues would agree, Masterpiece is the most comfortable fair in the world. Just the depth of the cushions, the width of the aisles, it is, and it's the right size. So it's becoming more comfortable for the visitor, but I think more rigor than ever is required on the part of vetters, on the part of dealers who are trying to stand out in a crowded field through design, on the part of designers who are designing at an ever higher level for these fairs. So it's kind of moving in 2 different directions. And I'm thinking of all the hard work that goes into them behind the scenes.
Masterpiece actually at the live fair actually encourages this with best booth design awards and best objects and the like. And I think that, I mean, that's not why they do it, but I think it is an incentive to make sure that your stands really do invite the customer in an attractive way.
And we've struck on this idea, and I love Jamie's terms about the acquisitor. I mean, I think that many of us in the field are convinced that the older style of sequential collecting is, we're moving out of that phase and toward a different kind of phase where people are interested in different disciplines, different specialties. They may be connoisseurs, but they're not necessarily on the hunt for the third example of X. They're looking for things that they can fall in love with and live with, that make for interesting juxtapositions. And that seems like a theme for museums, for Isabella's clients, and for Jamie's.
That's exactly what I tell my patrons, is to acquire things that you like. And I'm there to make sure that what they acquire is what it's supposed to be.
Yes.
And then, ultimately, hopefully that work will come to the museum. And then we are the ones who acquire in a more studied way. But for our patrons, it's really about finding things of quality that they can live with and enjoy.
Yes.
I think that one of the things that with the design of the stands is so important is, how do you get somebody into your stand who doesn't know that they're going to fall in love with something? You have to grab them by the lapels from the aisle. And once they're in, you can tell your tale, you can point out something, you can engage them. And I think design is huge in that way. I think that boring stands people walk by.
Yes. And this all makes a fair more attractive in a digital age, when perhaps people are more comfortable shopping online than ever before. And so at least once we're back out and mounting fairs again, what is the thing that gets people to come? The design is one of those things. The restaurants and the social environment are another. And Isabella, could you tell us a bit of how you view that social environment? I mean, Masterpiece is a very sociable fair, and you always see, you know, very specific people lined up at Scott's or in the restaurants, and how does that kind of impact your work? Oh, and I think you'll need to unmute.
Sorry. I think that's one of the nicest things about Masterpiece is the quality of the environment. And again, sometimes if your clients do only have a window of an hour, or, you know, quite often they don't want to commit to being at a fair all morning just because it is exhausting. Having such a plethora of other things to do there, like, you know, have a great lunch, is another way of actually being able to interact with them, which is, whereas, you know, if you say we'll go have lunch at Scott's, we'll spend an hour or two looking around, it's much more of a relaxed environment where, and it's a much easier environment for them to stop and look at things that they wouldn't normally look at. I think, you know, obviously the social aspect of art fairs is something that I'm missing dreadfully. I think we all probably are right now. Not only to see friends and colleagues, but also just the opportunity to learn, and to hear from, that's, I think, the one thing that is difficult with online viewing rooms is that there's no opportunity to ask someone to tell you more about an object necessarily, and you don't want to click and quiet because you don't want to waste their time, and, you know, so there is, I think that's really the only kind of interaction that I think is very difficult to replicate online, because the great thing at Masterpiece is being able to be at, it's a great opportunity to learn about so many objects from real specialists and dealers in the field that you wouldn't otherwise have a chance to do. And even just as an educational aspect, you know, I think all of us will say that we're all constantly learning, and that's the great thing about being in these industries, is you can never exhaust the resources. And I think that's the one kind of shame, but it is so amazing to be able to go there and make more of a day out and make it much more enjoyable for any collector than other fairs are, where they see it as a very busy, very time sensitive environment that's very demanding of them, as much as it is, you know, just a great opportunity to see a lot of cross-category items in one go, which is very, you know, in London is very, very rare.
I think it's also interesting.
Go ahead.
That walking through with a client and being greeted by the dealers, and the dealers know you, and you have an interaction and a warmth that is a very reassuring thing to them, that you know what's going on and what you're dealing with.
Yes, and they can, I mean, people are having fascinating conversations and learning. I mean, even Stephen, who is such an expert, is learning from dealers. We all are. But
Absolutely.
they're also establishing relationships of trust and bonds and deriving stories from that. I mean, so much is happening. And it feels like the comfortable nature of the fair allows for that interaction to happen. It allows for daydreaming and imagining new things to happen as well. This is fascinating. So I think that we'll move on to the Q&A shortly. But I want to just ask Stephen quickly about loan exhibitions, because I think it's a fascinating part of this mix of elements that, you know, it's both elevated the fair and it has brought new forms of attention to museum collections. It's kind of the endpoint in a cycle, you know, where a museum is able to acquire objects and then ultimately it interprets them, and that interpretation might happen at an art fair again. So could you tell us about that a bit?
Well, I completely agree. It's you know, it's reimagining the art exhibition, really, and really taking it outside the confines of the museum walls, the museum spaces, which are sometimes intimidating for people, and showing that a group of objects, even a group of 3 objects or 1 object, can result in a beautiful exhibition if designed properly. And I think these exhibitions within fairs are very design dependent, because They must be attractive. Then everything has to have, as I like to say, case presence. You know, it really, things have to bring people in, and then you have an opportunity to educate and to learn. And they are a wonderful way, I think, of showing that works that are in museums can also be had on the floor of the art fair. You know, you too can collect at this level.
It's also perhaps the last pit stop before an object becomes untouchable in the context of a museum collection.
That is correct, yes.
Or maybe disappears into an interior that Jamie designed. I mean, this is an opportunity for people to see things that might not be seen again in public for a generation or more, or touchable, you know?
Right.
Handleable. Excellent. So if all of the attendees could submit your questions, we'll just fluidly flow into a Q&A. And it looks like some are queuing up now. So just give us one moment. All right, so we have the question. Oh, this is really interesting. Okay, so one person is asking, for you personally, what defines the most engaging type of stand for a new art collector? So like almost imagining your favorite stands from previous editions of Masterpiece that you think are particularly effective from the perspective of your discipline.
I would say that for me, I think it's one where you can take the most out of it with you, in the sense that you learn and it opens up your eyes to something you perhaps hadn't considered, to a period in history that you hadn't engaged with. You know, I think for any collector, new collector, I always, you know, while they do want to acquire, it's really nice sometimes to hold people back and really let them learn and see a lot of examples of something before finally committing to the purchase of something from that genre. So I think being able, for me, the best stand would be somewhere where there's an opportunity for them to see how different dialogues can be collected in a single space, how you can set up an environment in your own collection where objects from different categories are able to coexist and able to create relationships between themselves that would at face value not exist.
Excellent. And Jamie?
Well, Isabella just gave me the greatest opening, because that's exactly what we like to create and do. But it is, I think, in so many other ways besides a specific aesthetic point of view, it gives us scale to things. People can see how they relate to each other. But I think that it's about two-dimensional, three-dimensional, decorative arts, fine arts, all coming together really is so exciting. And anything with a strong point of view, I think that for me, the weak things are all, because none of our clients live with these kind of museum-like settings that are devoid of anything. That's a museum. That's a private museum, but that's not their residential settings.
And Stephen?
For me, it's very simple. It has to take my breath away. And almost every stand at Masterpiece has something that does that. And that does not mean it has to be huge, large, though that is often helpful. But I mean, some of my most favorite objects through the years have been works of jewelry that you know, were done in the arts and crafts period. And when you see this exquisite enamel, not even diamonds, or you know, but the craftsmanship is so extraordinary. All the way up to, you know, who doesn't love a chandelier? I mean, you know, so I think that you know, I'm walking down the aisle, and if something catches my eye, if there's something that takes my breath away, I'm good for at least 15 minutes.
Right, Stephen, do you find it often very important. You have your own time without anybody interrupting you to walk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I need to make, and I would think for your clients, Isabella and Jamie, I need to make an emotional connection with a work of art if I'm going to acquire it. And that can be fleeting, you know, it can be as simple as a gasp or, you know, something that catches your eye. But I have to have a connection. There has to be a connection. And to do that, I rarely do that when I'm with others. I do it on my own. So I keep going back and back to the fair on my own.
I always, since I always go more than once, I have the luxury of doing a fair clockwise and then counterclockwise.
That's a good tip.
When you come down the aisle from another angle, I inevitably discover something I didn't see the first time around.
Right.
I live about 8 minutes from the fair walking, so I'm really lucky.
You are.
And that's another great thing about the fair, is it also has the ability to highlight some designers from the area. Pimlico Road is so rich with wonderful historical companies, from Utrecht to, you know, Gordon Watson, to real key definers, and to be able to introduce them and elevate them even just, you know, 1 block away is something that's also really great for the positioning and the location of where the fair is.
That's such a great point. No, these fairs have become hubs for all manner of disciplines, and that extends out beyond the walls of the fair. You know, having helped guide dealers through the process of building a booth, I think one thing that's noteworthy is that even if their own material does not exemplify these cross connections or juxtapositions, even if they have one very, you know, sort of a strictly consistent offering of goods, they can design a booth that contrasts with that material. So, you know, the juxtaposition might not be between the objects in the booth, but it could be between the objects and their environment. And I love seeing a sea of English furniture in an extremely contemporary setting, or contemporary art almost in a period room setting, you know? And I think it's that theater that amps up the emotion that leads to buying, but it's the same emotion that leads to appreciation, you know, even if you're not buying.
I did a fair before where we recreated an apartment of 1950s Paris that some of you may have seen, and people cried. And it really became not about the artworks that were placed in the booth. It was about the authenticity of the material and of everything, of the set design and the production. And it's amazing to see the effect that actually production and, you know, set booth design can have on an audience when you're given the ability to create something out of nothing.
Yes. So we have a question about tours and whether or not there are guided experiences at Masterpiece. And I know that there are, and I also think that everyone on this panel discussion leads tours, even if they're informal, for their various constituencies and clients. So when the live edition of the fair opens up again, I'm sure that we can all go to the website of the fair to look for guided tours, but I'm confident everyone here will be leading them as well in their own practices.
My charge is a gin and tonic at the end.
I love it. So I think it's nice to address this, you know, translating back into the online environment, because we're going to be wrapping up the Q&A momentarily. We're all very excited about Masterpiece Online, and we're excited about the next live edition that we can attend. But in the context of these online experiences, what are some of your favorite ones? What has caught your eye in the past couple of months? You know, museums have done a lot of interesting things. Anything to recommend to our attendees today?
If I may, a couple of mine, and I have to tell you that the online content, again, especially being cross-category over the last 3 months, has been visually exhausting. I mean, it takes me half a day to clear my inbox of everything that came in, and I'm a sadist, so I have to read and look at everything. There's a few standouts, and I think for museums, the way that they're trying to engage with works, Crystal Bridges did a really amazing translation of a major Carrie James Marshall painting in their collection into 3D. So it allowed the viewer to really engage with the layering in the picture, and to bring it together. And it was very good for a general audience. And I really enjoyed the way that museums are, you know, thinking outside of the box and how to engage with art enthusiasts of all ages and all experiences. And then the two other things is I've really enjoyed any opportunity where, and as I mentioned, where you can have a director or someone from the gallery just explaining an object, just, you know, just telling you a little bit of the story, getting you, you know, hooked in and learning more about the object. Because, you know, like I said, we can't all know everything about everything. And every time I go to a gallery, and if I don't know something about the object, I love asking, you know, one of the specialists on the booth to talk to me about it, because they're going to know it so much better than I could even try and hash out. So that's been really great. And then any opportunity to see anything on video where you can have a sense of a feel for it, like a Calder on video is just a dream. So I think there's some real opportunity for 3D objects to understand them in this new era of, you know, it's obviously very easy to think about two-dimensional objects, and a lot of primary artworks are bought from JPEGs anyway, but the creativity of being able to show the movement of a Calder or something like that is really tactile and engaging. So for me, those are kind of the highlights.
Brilliant. What about you, Jamie and Stephen, before we wrap up?
I'm with Isabella that I've actually found the amount of material coming through kind of overwhelming. I think that it's a challenge both for the viewer as well as the presenter to figure out how to make it enticing, make it engaging, make it easy to use, and it's just another learning experience that we're going through now, that with so much in the world that will lead us to permanent changes. So we must adapt. We will adapt.
And this Zoom-based panel discussion is just another example of that. Who would have thought we'd be on Zoom doing this only a couple of months ago?
I don't actually have a middle name. I'm thinking about changing my name and adding Zoom to it.
You'll be very good.
I would just call out and congratulate the dealers who have taken specific objects from their inventory and discussed the context surrounding them. A number of masterpiece dealers have done this, and if you go to their websites, this is where they've captured this material, but they've also emailed it to a lot of us who are on their distribution lists. But those have been so fascinating for me, and I've really enjoyed, because I've learned a lot about the passion of the dealer as a result. And I find that, again, just so incredibly engaging. So, I mean, we've done digital work too for our museum, and I would encourage you to go to the cma.org. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. But for me personally, I've really enjoyed what the dealers have pulled together.
Yeah, and I mean, in the context of the Soane Museum, there were several assets, including a 3D tour, that because the museum is an institution, we kind of had that ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't, they're often sort of mom and pop operations. And so to see them dig deep and into their passions to present this material under challenging circumstances has been inspiring in a specific way. And I think that we'll see even more of that through Masterpiece Online, which is the order of the day and the event that we're looking forward to this week. So with that, I want to thank Isabella, Jamie, and Stephen again. This has been a most engaging discussion, thanks to your expertise, and to thank all of our attendees who have very patiently listened to us, but hopefully you've had a good time. And this discussion has led to some new thoughts about the fair as it exists online and back in physical reality, where we hope to see you soon.